It is a real joy to welcome my Congressman Chris Deluzio, to the broadcast. And if you want to watch this interview stream live, go to Kdka Radio.com. He is in the Metropolitan Window video screen and click on Kdka Watch. Congressman, lots to get to. Thank you for taking time out of your always busy schedule to join me. I saw this on your social media page just a few moments ago. So let's begin with the big story, we both being Catholics, but really this is about the human race, the passing of Pope Francis. Go ahead, please.
A major loss, of course, for Catholics the world over, but so many others who looked to Pope Francis for spiritual and moral leadership. And I think the ability that he had to speak with moral clarity was, I can't think of who else with his kind of profile, his platform, used it for such good. And it's a major loss to the church, of course, but I think to the world.
Earlier, you know all about this on hand, Mount Lebanon, the governor talking about because of the arson fire at his residence, trying to make millions happen for these fire departments throughout our country and especially right here in our neighborhood. So talk about the significance of that and the money that he's going to try to generate over the next couple of years.
Well, Governor Shapiro is trying to do everything he can in the budget for our state to support firefighters and first responders. And the point I was making was, in this moment, what we're seeing Washington and the Trump administration really cut things like funding for police and fire and so many others. It's so important that the governor and his team step in to fill the void, and he's doing exactly that. A proposal that I saw him roll out today with substantial investment for our local fire departments, I think a $30 million piece of it with some other pilot program and funding cancer screening. And I reminded folks today when I was there, one of the consequences of these firings from the Trump administration, including at NIOSH and the CDC, is we've seen the firefighter cancer screening website go down because of the firings of staff by the Trump administration. I mean, you can't defend this stuff. And so it's really an important time for the governor to step in as guys like me are trying to push the fight down in Washington and stand up for our communities.
Well, you don't like to say it, but the bottom line usually comes down to money, and the bulls and bears on Wall Street are panicking, to say the least. So let's just elaborate a little bit more on these government cuts, and then we'll move on to our next topic. Congressman Chris Deluzio, go ahead, sir.
Well, a place I've been very, very worried, and I've been hearing about from the people I represent, Social Security. If you fire people in the Social Security Administration, whether they are at field offices, whether they work on the website, man the phones, you name it, you're going to risk people not getting their benefits. I've been sounding the alarm, firing off letters. The Social Security Administration has been directed to ignore congressional inquiries, which I find unacceptable. I've demanded a meeting with the head of the Social Security Administration. They've got to explain themselves, and they've got to stop what they're doing that might put at risk these benefits that folks earn, after a lifetime of hard work. And I really think it's dangerous. We haven't even gotten into cuts to Veterans Affairs. My fellow veterans and I rely on the VA to be there for healthcare and benefits. And if you fire 80,000 people in the VA, you're not going to deliver on this country's sacred obligation to care for veterans who have earned that care and benefits.
Yeah, subsequently you put them in the unemployment line, and that just basically is more of a burden on the taxpayer, right?
Well, and some of these decisions we're seeing about whether it's canceling leases for buildings or forcing people who've been remote back to work, we want the best delivery of services for the public, period, at the most cost-effective way. But I've already heard reports, say in VA, where they don't have the space. Maybe they now have to sign new leases for parking. You've got people who take sensitive clinical psychotherapy even, who don't have the space to take those kinds of calls in a confidential setting. I mean, this is boneheaded stuff that could really hurt veterans' care and end up costing us more money in the long run.
Governor also said that he talked to the president about U.S. Steel and how they both want jobs to stay in Western Pennsylvania. But for my audience, I have to ask, I'm all for this Nippon Steel deal because I don't see an American steel company that has that deep of pockets. It's not going to be an ESOP program, but we're talking about generational type of paychecks. The Mon Valley could use it, but so could we here in Pennsylvania. Your thoughts on U.S. Steel, Nippon Steel, and that ongoing story, Congressman Chris Deluzio?
Well, look, my goal and the governor's goal he laid out today, I think, are the same. Protect Western Pennsylvania's steelmaking jobs, the headquarters jobs, and more broadly, American steelmaking. And if and when we see a new proposal that the president will have to entertain, I'll be able to assess it then. But my goal hasn't changed. And if we're in a negotiation, I want a tough bargain, hard bargain that's going to protect steelmaking here, not just for the next few months, but for several years to come. We are in global competition with communist China and so many others around steel. We've got to have American steel making for our defense, for our infrastructure, and a heck of a lot else.
Talked about the military, very near and dear to your heart. Your thoughts about what's happening in Ukraine?
Well, day to day, it seems like the administration is, putting a little bit out on their negotiations and efforts to broker a peace, which, of course, I think the Ukrainian people, of course, want peace, but they also want dignity and sovereignty. And these are people who were invaded by the Russian military, by Vladimir Putin's military. They did not start this war. And I think it's been, frankly, an imperative for us and our European friends to help them in that fight. And I really did not like the way President Zelensky was treated in the Oval Office. And again, these are people defending their homeland and democratic government, small d democratic government. They ought to have our support to wage that fight on their own terms. But I think it's important that you've seen the Europeans step in as well to fill some of the void to support them.
All right, last question, Congressman Chris Deluzio. We both share something in common. We're Democrats, and we're looking to the future, and I like youth, and I think youth will be served. I've got young children, grandchildren, and I like your thought process. But my question to you is, what do we do as members of the Democratic Party to kind of get back in the game? Because it feels as though we're on the bench right now.
Well, right now in Washington, at least where I had the honor of serving, the other party, my Republican counterparts, control the White House, the House, and the Senate. It'd be easy just to say, hey, they're messing things up and they're doing a terrible job at things. And we've had plenty of points to make there that they have messed things up, but you got to have more than just the other guys are bad. And so I'm someone who believes you got to say what you're going to do. If you're trusted with being in charge in the Congress or the White House, I've been laying out ideas about restoring the American dream, about growing the pie and making sure that hardworking people got bigger slices of that pie. We got to be able to do both of those things. And look, Rob, I'm 40 years old. Whatever that makes me, I've got young kids. I'm 40. My generation, we're the first generation since the Second World War who doesn't expect to be better off than our parents. And that is a failure across both parties for decades. And people younger than me have it worse. We got to turn that ship around. And that's going to require bold action from Washington to break up so many of these monopolies that are hurting consumers and small businesses. We got to grow more in this country. And we got to have workers have more say on the job. That's not easy. It's not going to happen overnight, but we got to be in that fight. And we got to be clear about who we're fighting against when we're taking a swing for our people.
We had you on a few weeks ago talking about tariffs, and you were kind of leaning into at least the conversation. Do you still feel that way? And do you think they're rolling it out the right way, or is it gone the wrong way?
I think the president's made a mess of this. And tariffs are a really powerful tool that he has abused, I think, pretty aggressively. When you lay tariffs across the board to countries, friend or foe alike, across sectors, not paying attention to whether you need some strategic trade enforcement, you're going to mess things up. And we're seeing that now. I've heard from farmers and small businesses, manufacturers, workers, you name it. People are suffering under what he's done right now. And I think it's a huge mistake. He should change course. And a piece of this that I think this president needs to remember, you can't just at the swipe of a pen upend decades of stability. And you talk to CEOs who want to invest in manufacturing in Western Pennsylvania or anywhere in this country, they need stability. We should be tougher. We should have industrial policy to make more in this country, but you need some stability and certainty about what may come tomorrow or the weeks and months to come. You see it in the markets and the way folks who have retirements and pensions are getting battered right now. You see it in the way that farmers, small businesses, and others are feeling pain. This is not the way to fix what I think has been a disastrous race to the bottom on ending free trade. I think the president's plan here has been really bad for places like Western Pennsylvania, and we got to see something different.
All right, Congressman, keep up the good work. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Rob. Take care.
All right, we'll come back. We got a lot to discuss up until 10 o'clock. It's your Pratt Pack on KDK. Stay with us.